So I am preparing to prepare, talking about the ice. So I thought about the, well, I was box breathing and, oh, I look so bad, don't I? I was box breathing and I actually was remembering a nightmare after I had the idea of doing this. So yeah, I'm putting on a fragrance. Just got on the shower. All right, so I had a nightmare this morning. I had a nightmare this morning where I came down the stairs and it both felt like this house and it didn't. And it's hard to describe, but when I do what I'm planning to do, it's going to be a bit more like it. And in the nightmare, there was a man with a gun at the back door, shorter than me, a handgun with not a real long um, muzzle, and I got it away from him, but then I wasn't sure I got everything away from him, and I was trying to lock the door and yelling for help from my dad. So yeah, that was a nightmare. And I was in the shower and I was thinking, that could be psychic and it could be something someone might experience other than myself. And then I just told myself, things happen every day and you don't have control over everything. So, sometimes we pick up on things and we can't really do much, I guess, and so I don't know, I dream an awful lot about, I have a lot of nightmares about guns and gun. So anyhow, well, I put this up here and so I have put that there so that I can put a canvas there right here, and I think I have enough because I think I have a whole roll of canvas. So there, and well, the first two places I thought of were here and in the back room. So I plan to put canvas here, and 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 here. All right. So I don't come back here a lot because, well, Garth's okay when but still, I don't spend a huge amount of time in there. But part of the way that I work, and I think I'll wait and sit and talk about this, but it's gradual. So I'm planning to put a canvas here over this, and I'm planning to put a canvas over that. Okay, so I think that's 5, and what I have back here, and I need to measure a little bit to make sure I don't cut them too big. Well, that one next to the door, that it's not too wide, but I've got a tape measure, I've got scissors, and I've got what I think is a whole roll of canvas. So primed canvas. So now I'm gonna go back and just talk about sort of the process for a minute. So, well, I was thinking about making another video after I put those up. I wanted to talk about it because that's actually kind of a lot of work, and it might be too much for me to do, cutting 5 canvases and putting them up. I don't know. It shouldn't be, but what I wanted to talk about, I said something about drawing a picture of child labor in Atlanta, and yeah, then I thought when I was box breathing, I literally could work on that. But the way that I work, I don't tend to work on one piece and complete it at one time. I tend to be kind of back and forth to a piece, and that can be over months. It really can be over years, actually. But those 2 pieces in the hall, those are done as far as I'm concerned. That piece, right, that piece and the one next to the door, I haven't been working on them, so I think putting canvas there is not a bad idea. And the piece in the back, that is not done yet. That's an in-progress piece, but putting a piece of canvas there too. I think about when I made pots, and I thought I would talk about that process and the way, it was not all at one time. So if you mix the clay, you mix the clay, and you might not use it that day. You mix the clay, and when you mix the clay, it's not a bad thing to put something from clay that is already made and all that. Like if you make something and you decide I'm gonna put this in the scrap bucket, then using something from the scrap bucket, what we were taught is that can help with sort of like helping the clay to have what it needs. So maybe there's a little bacterial activity, and who knows what else, but I mean, I never got sick from it. So, but you putting something from that into that is not a bad thing. All right. So if you mix the clay, you mix the clay. If you're throwing pots, the way that I was taught is we were being taught production pottery in North Carolina, and I never felt like I got to the point where, I mean, I certainly couldn't reproduce the same form again and again perfectly, so I might have a set of cups and they all varied some, and that kind of thing. And that's not a bad thing unless people want things to look just alike. And I think I felt like that was what we were kind of urged to strive for, at least to try to develop those skills. And our pottery, I don't know, what do I call him? Instructor, it was at a community college. He has a master's degree in industrial education. So, but, say I throw a few pots and then, or a person could throw a bunch. A person could throw 20 pots, however many, 5, 20, whatever. All right, you've got the pots there and you let them sit. Say you're throwing, like, let's just say a cup. So here's a cup and you put it lip side down and you let those dry. And then if I remember, did you back and forth? Maybe I'm trying to remember, and I could look at that photograph of me from 1993 maybe to help my memory. But you let them dry enough to where if you're going to trim them, you can trim them, because you can't do that when they're newly thrown as easily. But everyone is different, so a potter could, and a potter also could throw pieces that don't need to be trimmed. And everyone is different. Everything is different. Are there traditions in pottery? There are. I actually think that some of what we were taught, a little bit of what we were taught, at least with glazes, has a relationship to sort of Japanese pottery, and but we call it Appalachian. I don't know. I think he's from Appalachia, so. And some of us are Appalachian. Not everyone was, because people came from all over the place, because it's a good program. All right, so what I'm trying to say is that it isn't all at one time. So you might let pots sit and then trim them, and then they need to dry enough for you to bisque fire them. And again, this is the way we did it, and there are different ways of doing it, but when stoneware, you fire it, you glaze it, and then you fire it again. And one of the things that I like to do is, one of the things we would do, and maybe it's because we were just beginners, to wax the bottom so that when we glazed, we wouldn't have drips, because drips will, stick to the shelf when a pot is fired with glaze on it. So, thinking about how much that glaze is going to melt, and basically I think you can use that word, in the heat, and how far is the glaze going to drip, and making sure that there's enough area that is keeping it up. And you might trim the pot so that the glaze doesn't get to the shelf, because then you kind of have a damaged pot. All right, so one of the things I like to do is wax resist. So glazing, and what do you have as far as glaze? We made our glazes and in North Carolina, and you'd use tongs and dip it and try to make sure you're not getting too much. You have to time it well enough to make it not too thick. And then what I like to do is do some wax resist and then dip it in a different glaze. I did that with some. I also really liked to carve on pots, so I really love doing that. And to carve in a pot, of course, it has to be not completely wet off the wheel. So just there are these different sort of stages and steps, and it's a process. It's not all at one time. And when I am doing anything, really, I think, even sewing bags, I have, do I have a bunch of bags? I do. I've got a bunch of bags right here, and did I do these all at one time? I mean, I probably did a few at a time, but I cut the fabric before I did them, and I can have fabric sitting for years before I sew bags, and I have fabric sitting on the bed right now that I cut from a t-shirt. So, what are other examples? I mean, well, if I'm crocheting, and I haven't done that in a while, but crocheting like washcloths, dishcloths, yeah, I do that and then I'm done. Do that and then I'm done, and might use the whole um, ball of yarn, but maybe not all at once. So anyway, I'm saying it's a process. And my dad, of course he didn't paint all that in one day. I mean, I don't even know how long it took him to paint a painting, but if he showed us something, we had to be careful not to breathe on it. He was real, because it was watercolor and art. So, yeah. So what I think is that if I get the canvases up and then I even just start thinking about it, and then a person could say mark making, there are different ways of talking about it. How do I talk about it? I mean, is that a problem when a person learns too much of an academic way of talking about making art? It could be actually, but if I put up the canvases, I cut a canvas, put it up, cut a canvas, put it up, however much I can do without just being completely, worn out today. Then my mind can start kind of doing whatever my mind is going to do, and also things happen. So, and sometimes, you're working on something and then you hear, see something, you learn. For me, this is about bringing history into people's awareness. So am I going to actually, what might it look like? I mean, there's no telling. I mean, so, what am I going to go by each canvas and like make a line on it when I start? No, I'm not. I'm just going to put the canvases on the wall, and then they might be there for a week or two or a month and a half before I do anything. It's just sort of, it depends on whether I get that creative kind of thing, and then just noticing, because when I'm making art, I am, it's like I could say that I see things sometimes, and I've talked about this before, and I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, a process, and but I just thought I would show, preparing to prepare, to, I don't know how do I want to say, draw a picture, draw a picture of child labor in Atlanta, paint a picture, I don't know, preparing to work on that, and because there is not much out there, and then what do I do? Is there a way to, can you conjure information? Can you conjure things to where people become aware and put something out there, or maybe something appears and you just notice it? I don't know. People talk about manifesting, and I don't understand that. I think I understand conjuring a little better than that. I think that's actually tradition. All right, so that we don't talk about much, and we might not have a huge amount of control over when things happen and things like that. But this is important. People need to understand that there was child labor and that there are descendants, and sometimes we aren't treated real well, and maybe we're not treated real well, as a whole. But I just thought I'd share that, and I think after I get the canvases up, I'll probably walk around with the computer again and and show that. And again, it reminds me, thinking about what it's going to be like reminds me of the nightmare I had this morning, and I hope people are safe. I have had quite a few dreams about people breaking in, and I've had a lot of dreams about guns, and how much experience do I have with guns? Not much. I've worked in the lab. I've shot a firing range. But they're all around us, and yeah. So anyway, I just thought I would talk about it, and yeah, well, thanks for listening.